what I'm trying to wrap my head around is how the technology can integrate into our lives. Because, I'm not the most technological guy. I can do some things, but I'm not, like I said, I can't code or anything like that. And but I am smart enough to realize that as each generation comes in and starts going into adulthood, they sort of take over the trends and they sort of set the stage for what's going to happen. And you can ask anybody, who's like, I'm like, 30s, and I see these kids that are like 5, uh, flying through iPads, and I'm like, man, when I was 5, I was like out like pulling weeds, like killing
Doing
beetles. You know what I
dirt.
mean? Be like, these kids are just like ripping through technology like it's nothing. So to me, it seems like such a crazy idea to tokenize my house and sell it that way. But I think by the time these kids are older, they're going to be so engulfed in technology. Like this is just going to be their lives. I think that it's going to be more logical to them. And it certainly could be something that happens, in 20 years from now, just based on generational changes and how comfortable they're going to be with technology. Um, which brings me to, like you're more in this world than I am, but wonder if we could talk a little bit about Web3. And I know that I saw one of your shorts, you talked about AI agents,
Yeah.
non-fungible intelligence. I'm just
Yeah.
like, man, what is this? Like, this is just next level, like AI, NFIs. Like, I don't know, maybe break a little bit of this down for me because I don't know what's going on with this.
100%, 100%. And just to put a button on the prior line of thought, it's exactly like you said. The best investors, you have to look at where things are going, not where things are. And that's the biggest disconnect. And I have a son now, right? He's almost 1. He'll be 1 next month. And I have to now think about in a the most tangible way I've ever had to about the future. And I see the kids in the restaurants on the iPads at 2 years old. They can't even utter full sentences, but they're using an iPad. And aside from like the health challenges that's going to present to them, most likely, the psychological change that's fostering,
Mm-hmm.
they're already living most of their life on the computer. I'm living most of my life on the computer right now, but most of my life I've lived in real life. I'm using these tools for work, for business, to make more money so I can do more things in real life. These kids are just living their lives on these fucking screens. And so where does this go down the road? And naturally it goes to everything being digital. And if it's not digital, it just doesn't really compute to them. Like they'll live real life things. But I think that from that framework, it's much easier to see how these building blocks set that up so that they're not just kids on iPads, but these are men, women in their teens, their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, living their life. And what do they expect from an interfacing standpoint, from a convenience and usability standpoint? And it is far different than what we already do. Now, as far as AI goes, AI is already very prevalent in our lives. You saw that short because of AI, because it knows that, we follow each other, or you're subscribed to me on YouTube, we've engaged with each other, and it's basing all these other videos that you've seen and said, hey, this seems to be a good time to show Joe this particular video. We'll see if he takes the bait, so to say. And I write titles to work with that AI to know, all right, if I call it this particular thing, how will the algorithm read what's in it? And how will it serve it up? Anything that you do on any social media platform is AI. Spotify is AI, how it knows what song to play next, right? Automatically adjusting lights in your home, all these other things. And AI is sometimes a little misnomer because in most situations, it's just machine learning algorithms, right? It just takes a bunch of data and it finds patterns in the data. Whereas AI, and what most people think about, is generalized intelligence, which is like the iRobot, the Black Panther, like the Tony Stark robot, where you just talk to it and it just does things. And like, it just knows exactly what you mean context-wise. It can just do anything. That has not been released to the public yet. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. It has not been released to the public yet. Just also for fun facts, context, anytime you see like the latest and greatest innovation come to the public, the military and the military industrial complex, so that includes contractors, people like that, R&D folks in that space, they've usually had it for about 15 to 25 years at that point before the consumer public gets it. So if we got iPhones in 2010, they had iPhones in the 80s, basically. Right? Just something for people to keep in mind. Same thing with this fusion shit they just told y'all they just figured out. Like, oh, okay. Right. Either way, I know it's not the point of this conversation. I appreciate you letting me go on those little tangents, man.
Go ahead, man.
So the non-fungible intelligence effectively is a patent that has come from this company called Altered State Machine. And they're based out of New Zealand, and they're a tech company, which is part of a larger umbrella company called Futureverse, which used to be called Centrality back in the day. We won't get too deep, but basically about 7-8 years ago, there was a guy by the name of Aaron McDonald in New Zealand who started a fund of about $500 billion. He started to acquire different companies that he felt would be necessary in building out key infrastructure points to really create a metaverse. And so some of that is communications based, some of it is identity based, some of it is payments, some of it is entertainment IP, some of it is gaming. And he started buying up, basically created this big incubator, like a venture studio almost. And then starting to identify who's the strongest teams, who looks like they're really developing something that's like going to stand the test of time and be critical in this whole thing. And he started to bring them under one roof so that they could lean on each other's innovations so that the whole thing could build faster. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they have now officially consolidated 8 different companies at a minimum that they've announced so far into something called the Futureverse. And Altered State Machine is one of those companies. And Altered State Machine is the whole AI component. And so what they're doing is making it so that you can buy a brain, is what they call it. The agents, basically, an agent is this idea of having some autonomous agent that can go do things on your behalf. They can play in a game, right? They can be a soccer player in a game. They can be a boxing player in a game. They can be a trading assistant for you. They can be companion in some sort of metaverse world. They can do a lot of things. And to be frank, very direct, most of this utility is not live yet. It is early stages. They have shown demos and prototypes, and they have a lot of this core infrastructure working at this point, and they are rolling it out. This is not something that you build in a year, but they have built the fundamental pieces of this for the last 6 years. And so now they're getting to the point where they're having consumer-facing products. One of their partnerships is with FIFA, and they have a game called the AFA Football League. And the whole game is AI playing against each other. So each character, it's a 4v4 game. Each character is an agent. And an agent is a form and a brain. A form is basically, it's another NFT, but the form is basically what the brain goes into so it can act it out. Just like in real life, Joe, you are the form, and then you have your consciousness that inhabits the form and allows the form to do things. But without the form, the consciousness, there's in a way a limit to what the consciousness can do or how it can actually interact with the world more directly. So it's the same kind of parallel there. And the idea is, instead of when you use something like a open AI's ChatGPT, you're using someone else's AI and you just get the result from it. The difference here is that you would be able to own the AI. And so in that way, you are able to own this one, let's call it this algorithm. And the algorithm might be a certain way by default when you acquire it. But what they have done is they have given each of these brains a certain set of traits out the gate. It has a genome, it has a memory tree. And so with this genome, it basically dictates qualities, like a starting baseline for this brain in terms of its strengths and weaknesses. So ChatGPT might be really good at writing poems, but it might be really bad at writing scripts. I'm just giving an example. Both of those are writing, but or rather, better example, it's really good at text. It's really bad. It can't create images. So it has a strength in one category, it has a weakness in another. So these brains are the same way. And what they've done is basically lay out categories in this genome that developers can then tap into when they build on the ASM protocol to enable their apps to read this information and say, okay, if a brain has, let's call it speed, temperament, and coordination as traits, what does that look like in a video game versus what does that look like in a trading environment versus what does that look like in a consumer service chat situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'll elaborate more. I know it's like sort of, kind of, but
Yeah.
when you buy the brain, you now own that baseline algorithm. And now you can go ahead and you can train it and you can develop it to be better in certain areas to suit the need that you may want. And so then let's say that they have these AI gems that are powered by GPUs right now, and maybe that'll change down the road. But it's the same way that Stable Diffusion works right now. It's tapping into GPUs. Any of these things that are doing generative art, you're using GPUs, and there's a lot of people using them right now. And I have not heard anybody complain about the energy consumption. So once again, it's about narrative. So you own it, but that also means that you can take it and you can put it in other forms and in other applications and environments, because Alter State Machine is a platform that people can build on. Same way that people can build on Unity to build video games, they can build on Unreal Engine. You can deploy your apps to the iOS ecosystem. You can deploy it to the Android ecosystem. Alter State Machine is a protocol platform. So down the road, if you're a developer, you can build an application and you can do it with ASM in mind, knowing that you want your application to be compatible. Now, the most straightforward example of this right now are video games, where you can be a game developer and say, hey, I want the ability for people to be able to take and plug in this AI into the game, but how do we want that to work? What do we want the AI to influence? Because you still have to set the parameters around it. But at a fundamental level, if you own that AI, you now can move that AI through these different worlds, different environments. And what I'm doing is building it so that I actually have an ability to create franchises effectively, where because there's only a finite number of these core brains, and then you have kind of an offshoot of it. And so if you own some of these core ones, and there's a whole way to breed them and splice them, same way that people do with dogs. I want a purebred Doberman, or I want this, that, and a third. Well, you need to go source the genetics for it, look at its traits and qualities, and then you breed it to get what you want, and then you sell it to people. And so the same idea. You may want an AI to help you manage your portfolio down the road. How do you choose? Well, you're going to look at the performance of these different AIs, and then maybe you find one that's done really well, and you say, hey, I want you to breed an AI algorithm for me that's optimized for managing my portfolio. And so then, boom, I go to the lab, I breed this brain for you. Like literally, you can do this with ASM, and I sell it to you. And now you own one. And now you do whatever you want to with it. So without us spending another 2 hours talking about this, because there's a lot there, and that's why I made the video, that's like super high level, the idea of non-fungible intelligence. So just like non-fungible tokens, each one is unique. Non-fungible intelligence, each AI is unique.
Wow, that's really interesting. And like the first thing that comes to mind for me is algos. So we're talking about algos, but we already have algos in the market. So you get somebody like JP Morgan, for example, they have their own algos that run on, whatever technical analysis trends they want to use. Perhaps they could decide they wanted to sell that algo as an NFI, is what you're suggesting.
Yep, exactly. If they
But
wanted other people to have it, if they wanted to sell it at a premium.
But if other people have it, if enough people have it, that could influence the market in whichever way their algos are trading, no?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Just like if they, there's a stage where they're not investing in Bitcoin, and then there's a stage where they are. When they start investing in it, they influence the market.
Because it's a it's a whole new can of worms if you start buying
100%.
a algo from somebody who understands how that algo works. You probably wouldn't want to use it. Almost sounds like this could become something like I know when crypto was, a lot of people still say that crypto should be 5% of your portfolio, something like that. Maybe they'll say, have an NFI run 5% and see what happens. Have an aggressive one, have a medium, have a low risk one, whatever, and then do 80% by yourself. And maybe it could be something like that in the future. I think that's really interesting. I've never really heard anybody talk about the ability to have an algorithm for yourself.